Firaxa Tisari stood motionless on the viewing deck, her six-fingered hands pressed against the transparent alloy as her homeworld burned below. Purple flames consumed the once lush forests of Neavine, her ancestral lands reduced to ash by human warships. The invasion had been swift, brutal, and entirely unexpected. The Terran expansion fleet had claimed they were pursuing rebel elements, but their bombardment had been indiscriminate. Firaxa's silvery eyes with their distinctive vertical pupils remained dry. The Neavinians did not weep as humans did. Their grief manifested as a low-frequency hum that now filled her chest cavity. "Last shuttle departing in 3 minutes," announced the automated system. "All refugees must board immediately." She didn't move. At 22 cycles, Firaxa had been training to become a botanical engineer like her mother. Now her mother was gone, along with her father, her 3 siblings, and the ancestral home that had stood for 17 generations. All that remained was the small crystalline pendant around her neck, a family heirloom containing the encoded genetic memories of her ancestors. "You need to board now," came a gruff voice behind her. A human security officer, his uniform bearing the insignia of the Interstellar Refugee Commission. "We can't wait any longer." Firaxa turned slowly, the translucent membranes of her secondary eyelids flicking across her eyes, a sign of contempt in her culture. "Your kind did this. Why should I trust your evacuation?" The man's expression didn't change. "Because staying means dying. Your choice." As she reluctantly followed him to the shuttle, Firaxa made a silent vow. She would not simply become another statistic, another displaced alien seeking charity from the species that had destroyed everything she loved. She would find those responsible, the specific humans who had ordered the attack on her homeworld, and she would make them face justice. The refugee camp on Europa Station was a sterile maze of prefabricated units, each identical to the next. Thousands of beings from dozens of species displaced by human expansion were crammed into the station's outer ring. 6 months had passed since the destruction of Neavine, and Firaxa had transformed from a bright-eyed student into something harder and more focused. Her natural ability to understand systems, biological or mechanical, had served her well. She had secured work in the station's environmental control center, giving her access to station communications and personnel files. Night after night, she sifted through data, searching for the names and faces of those who had commanded the fleet that day. "You're still here," said Krell, a multiple-armed maintenance technician from the Proxima system. His bristly face tendrils twitched with concern. "Third shift in a row. Even your species needs rest." "I'm fine," Firaxa replied, not looking up from her terminal. The station's weak artificial lighting made the bioluminescent freckles across her cheekbones glow more prominently. Krell's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "You've been searching for them again, haven't you? The human commanders?" Firaxa finally turned to him. "I've found one. Fleet Captain Orion Reeve. He's being transferred to Europa Station next week for a diplomatic function." "And then what?" Krell's voice lowered. "What will you do when you face him?" Firaxa's hand instinctively went to the small blade hidden in her utility belt. In her culture, justice was personal and direct. What my ancestors would demand. What she didn't tell Krell was that she had also discovered something else in the files. Irregularities in the attack orders, communications that suggested the bombardment of civilian areas had never been authorized. Something didn't add up, and before she exacted her revenge, Firaxa needed to understand exactly what had happened to her world. Fleet Captain Orion Reeve was not what Firaxa had expected. The human who walked through the hydroponic section of Europa Station was leaner than the hulking military commanders depicted in propaganda. Gray streaked his close-cropped hair, and lines of fatigue bracketed his eyes. Most surprising was his evident discomfort with the ceremonial welcome being performed by station officials. While they fawned and flattered, Reeve's gaze kept drifting to the displaced aliens working in the hydroponics bay. Firaxa ducked behind a towering shelf of azure ferns, her heart racing. For months she had pictured Reeve as a monster, the embodiment of human cruelty and indifference, but the man before her seemed troubled. "Captain Reeve, If you'll follow me to the administrative sector, simpered Chief Administrator Paxley. Reeve paused. Actually, I'd like to see more of the refugee area. I understand survivors from Neavine are housed here. Paxley's smile faltered. I'm afraid that's not on the official itinerary, sir. Make it official, Reeve replied, his voice quiet but unyielding. Varaxa followed them at a distance, slipping through maintenance corridors that ran parallel to the main thoroughfares. Her knowledge of the station's layout allowed her to stay just ahead of the tour, emerging briefly to observe from shadows and alcoves. In the community center, Reeve asked pointed questions about living conditions and integration programs. When Guy, a young Neavinian child, approached him, curious about his uniform insignia, Reeve knelt to eye level, a gesture that surprised Varaxa. Most humans found the silvery, vertical-pupiled eyes of her people disconcerting. I'm sorry about your home, she heard him tell the child. The words seemed genuine. That night, Varaxa hacked into Reeve's assigned quarters. She had planned this moment for months, how she would confront him, force him to acknowledge what he had done before she delivered ancestral justice. The ceremonial blade felt heavy against her hip as she slipped through the ventilation system. She dropped silently into his darkened quarters but found them empty. Frustrated, she began searching his personal terminal. If she couldn't confront him tonight, perhaps she could find evidence of his guilt. What she discovered instead sent shockwaves through her. Communication logs, classified reports, and personal journal entries revealed a very different story than the one she had constructed. Reeve had opposed the military action at Neavine. His ships had been ordered to target only confirmed rebel positions, but someone had altered the targeting parameters during the operation. Reeve had tried to abort the bombardment when he realized civilians were being hit, but communications had been jammed. Most damning was a recorded argument between Reeve and his superior, Admiral Varric, days after the attack. Reeve had demanded an investigation, calling the bombardment a war crime. Varric had coldly informed him that the incident had been classified as necessary collateral damage in pursuit of high-value targets. Finding what you're looking for? Reeve's voice came from behind her. Varaxa spun, blade drawn. The captain stood in the doorway, unarmed, regarding her with weary eyes. You're Neavinian, he observed. I've been hoping to speak with survivors. You destroyed my world, Varaxa hissed, though the conviction in her voice wavered. Yes, Reeve said simply. My fleet carried out the attack that decimated your homeworld, and I have to live with that every day for the rest of my life. The blade in Varaxa's hand trembled. Everything she had planned, every scenario she had rehearsed for this confrontation, crumbled against the reality before her. You should know, Reeve continued, making no move toward her despite the weapon. I've been conducting my own investigation. Unofficially, of course. The Admiralty closed the book on Neavine, but I haven't. Why should I believe you? Varaxa demanded, though the logs she had just read provided their own answer. Reeve stepped forward and activated a holographic display. Three-dimensional images materialized between them. Tactical readouts, communication transcripts, and orbital scans of Neavine during the attack. The targeting systems were overridden remotely. My weapons officers were locked out. When I tried to abort, our communications were jammed. He looked directly into her silver eyes. Someone wanted maximum destruction on Neavine, and they used my fleet to do it. Varaxa lowered her blade slightly. The admiral you argued with? Varric is involved, but he's not the mastermind. Reeve's face hardened. There's a faction within Terran Command that believes the only path to human dominance is to eliminate potential threats before they arise. Your people's rapid advancements in biotechnology put you on their list. The implications staggered her. You're suggesting the attack wasn't about rebels at all? It was genocide? Preemptive neutralization is their preferred term. Disgust colored Reeve's voice. I've been gathering evidence, but I need someone who understands Neavinian systems. Someone who can help me access encrypted data from your world's research facilities before the attack. Varaxa finally lowered her blade completely. And if I help you expose these people, what justice will there be for my world? Will humans punish their own? That depends on whether we can find irrefutable proof, Reeve replied honestly. But I can promise you this, I will stand with you whatever comes. Your people deserve the truth, and those responsible deserve to face it. A tense alliance formed that night. Trust came slowly, built on shared purpose rather than affinity. Varaxa provided access to Neovinian archival codes, while Reeve used his military clearance to retrieve classified data. Together, they began reconstructing the events leading to the destruction of her world. Working from Reeve's quarters when he was on duty, and from maintenance tunnels when he wasn't, Varaxa discovered a pattern of surveillance focused on Neovine's premier biotechnology institute where her mother had worked. The institute had been developing revolutionary terraforming methods that would have made harsh environments habitable without massive technological infrastructure. Such technology would have given non-human species independence from Terran-controlled habitation systems. They saw it as economic warfare. Varaxa realized, the pieces falling into place. My people weren't developing weapons. We were developing freedom. Reeve nodded grimly. And nothing frightens power more than the prospect of losing control. Their investigation did not go unnoticed. Security personnel began conducting random searches in the refugee sector. Varaxa's workstation was mysteriously reassigned. Station cameras tracked her movements more frequently. We're running out of time, Reeve told her during one of their clandestine meetings. Admiral Varric is scheduled to arrive tomorrow for the diplomatic conference. If he discovers what we're doing, he won't, Varaxa interrupted. Her technical skills had grown sharper over the past weeks, honed by necessity and fueled by purpose. I've created a secure channel through the station's waste reclamation network. They won't be monitoring sewage data streams. Reeve almost smiled. Resourceful. I learned from watching humans, she replied, not entirely without bitterness. You always underestimate what you consider beneath you. That night, they finally broke through the encrypted files. What they found confirmed their worst suspicions and revealed an imminent threat to other worlds like Neovine. The diplomatic conference transformed Europa Station's central dome into a showcase of interstellar politics. Representatives from 12 systems mingled beneath holographic displays of unity and progress, all carefully choreographed to present Terran leadership as benevolent and necessary. Admiral Elias Varric moved through the gathering like a predator among prey, his immaculate white uniform adorned with commendations and medals. At 78, his commanding presence remained undiminished by age. A lifetime of wielding power had hardened rather than weakened him. From her position serving refreshments, Varaxa observed him with cold calculation. She had memorized his face from records, but seeing him in person, smiling, accepting accolades, made her blood run cold. This man had helped orchestrate the death of millions for political advantage, and here he stood, celebrated. Remember the plan, Reeve had cautioned earlier. We need access to his personal quantum key. Without it, we can't authenticate the evidence we've gathered. The plan was simple, but dangerous. Create a distraction, isolate Varric briefly, and use a specialized scanning device to copy his security credentials. Reeve would handle the distraction while Varaxa, less recognizable, would obtain the scan. What they hadn't anticipated was the presence of Commander Lyra Damodar, Varric's protege, and security chief. She shadowed the Admiral constantly, her cybernetically enhanced eyes scanning the crowd with algorithmic precision. Complication, Varaxa subvocalized into the microscopic communicator hidden in her uniform collar. The watchdog is here. Understood, came Reeve's equally quiet reply. Implementing contingency theta. Minutes later, alarms blared throughout the station. Attention all personnel. Environmental systems have detected a potential pathogen in Sector 17. Containment protocols are now in effect. The calculated chaos that followed separated Varric from his protege. As Damodar coordinated security's response, Varaxa slipped into the private chamber where Varric had been escorted for safety. The human guards posted outside never noticed the maintenance panel sliding open behind them. Varek stood at a communication terminal, his back to the hidden entrance. I don't care about containment protocols, he was saying to someone on the EO. Secure channel. The Phase 2 authorization must proceed as scheduled. The Centauri system cannot develop further resistance. Varaxa froze. The Centauri, another non-human civilization with advancing biotechnology. They were next. She activated the scanner, aiming it carefully at the Admiral's personal terminal where he had inserted his security key. The device required 3 seconds of uninterrupted scanning. 3 seconds during which any movement from Varek would ruin everything. 2 seconds. Varek ended his call. 3 seconds. The Admiral turned. Their eyes met across the room, silver alien pupils locking with cold human irises. Recognition flashed across Varek's face. Neavinian, he said, his hand moving toward the alarm panel. Varaxa was faster. A swift strike to the nerve cluster at the base of his neck, a technique Reeve had taught her, and the Admiral collapsed unconscious. I have it, she transmitted to Reeve as she confirmed the successful scan. And more. I heard him authorize something called Phase 2 against the Centauri system. Get out now. Reeve's response came urgently. Damodar is heading back. Varaxa slipped back into the maintenance tunnel just as the door slid open, bearing the stolen data that would expose the conspiracy and potentially save another world from Neavine's fate. Varaxa and Reeve huddled in the forgotten storage compartment they had converted into their operational center. Around them, holographic displays showed the damning evidence they had compiled. The falsified intelligence about Neavinian rebels, the override commands that had turned a limited operation into planetary devastation, and most crucially, the strategic plan authorizing similar actions against 5 other non-human civilizations developing independent technologies. With Varek's quantum key, we've authenticated everything, Reeve said, studying the authorization chains. This goes beyond just the Admiral. 3 members of the Terran High Council are directly implicated. Varaxa's fingers danced across the interface, organizing the evidence into irrefutable sequences. How do we release this? Your military will bury it again. Not if we bypass them entirely. Reeve activated a communications protocol she didn't recognize. There's an organization, independent journalists, ethical hackers, former intelligence, officers who've grown disillusioned. They call themselves the Lighthouse. You trust them with this? I've worked with them before. Quietly. Reeve's expression was grim. They have distribution channels that can't be silenced. Once this evidence goes live, it will reach every system simultaneously. As they prepared the data package, station security alerts suddenly blared. On their monitors, they watched armored units converging on their previous meeting locations. They've tracked our movements, Varaxa realized. How much time do we have? Not enough. Reeve made a decision. I'll draw them off, you complete the transmission. Varaxa grabbed his arm. They'll kill you. Probably not. Too many questions if a fleet captain dies under mysterious circumstances. His attempt at reassurance fell flat. But they'll make me disappear into some black site detention facility. She knew he was right, and that she would face worse as a non-human. The fragile respect for alien rights vanished quickly when imperial interests were threatened. There's an alternative, she said suddenly. The Centauri delegation is still on station. If we can reach them, show them they're next. They'd grant asylum, Reeve finished her thought. But we'd need to cross 4 security zones to reach their diplomatic quarters. Varaxa's silver eyes gleamed. I didn't survive this long by taking the obvious path. What followed was a desperate race through Europa Station's service corridors and ventilation systems. Varaxa led, her natural agility and memorized knowledge of the station's layout guiding them through narrow passages where security couldn't follow. Reeve kept pace despite his larger frame. Decades of military training evident in his efficient movements. They reached the outer perimeter of the Centauri diplomatic zone, just as Commander Damodar's security forces cut off their final escape route. Captain Reeve. Damodar's voice echoed through the corridor. By authority of Emergency Security Provision 15C, you are ordered to surrender yourself and the alien insurgent. Reeve and Varaxa exchanged glances. They were 20 meters from The Centauri security line, a distance they couldn't cross without being captured or killed. One of us needs to make it, Reeve said quietly. With the evidence. We'll only get one chance to release it, Varaxa answered. She pressed the data, crystal containing their evidence, into his hand. The Centauri will listen to you. You're human, one of their own turned whistleblower. I'm just another alien victim. Before he could protest, she stepped out into the corridor, hands raised. I surrender, she called to Damodar's forces. The human is my hostage. As security converged on her position, Reeve used the distraction to slip across to the Centauri line. The last thing Varaxa saw before being tackled to the ground was Reeve being received by the tall, crystalline forms of the Centauri diplomatic guard. She smiled through bloodied lips. Justice for Neavine was finally within reach. The trial of Admiral Elias Varric and his co-conspirators became the most watched proceeding in interstellar history. For the first time, the Interstellar Tribunal included equal representation from non-human civilizations, a change demanded by the Centauri and 6 other species that had threatened to withdraw from all treaties with Earth following the revelations. Varaxa watched from her cell in the detention center as Reeve testified, his military bearing undiminished despite the disgrace he had suffered among his own kind. He named names without hesitation, presented evidence with precision, and when asked why he had turned against his own command structure, he simply said, "Because humanity must be better than this if we deserve to reach for the stars." The conspiracy had been even more extensive than they had initially discovered. 17 worlds had been targeted for preemptive neutralization, with Neavine serving as the test case for a new era of human dominance through selective extinction. 3 months into the proceedings, Varaxa received an unexpected visitor. Fleet Captain Reeve, now stripped of rank but granted provisional immunity, stood on the other side of the force field separating her cell from the corridor. "You look terrible," she observed. The stress had aged him visibly. "You look worse," he countered with the hint of a smile. The guards deactivated the barrier. "Prisoner Tisari, you've been granted conditional release into Captain Reeve's custody," announced the senior officer. "By order of the tribunal." Outside the detention facility, a small transport waited. Inside were representatives from 7 non-human species, including an elderly Neavinian whom Varaxa recognized from her childhood. Mentor Kelvis, one of her planet's most respected scientists. "Your actions have awoken something powerful," Kelvis told her, touching his forehead to hers in traditional greeting. "The coalition of sovereign species has formed in response to the evidence you and the human uncovered. We need both of you," added the Centauri ambassador, her crystalline, form-refracting light as she spoke, not just as witnesses, but as architects of what comes next. What came next unfolded over years rather than months. The tribunal's judgment was severe. The conspirators received the harshest sentences possible under interstellar law. But more importantly, fundamental changes transformed humanity's relationship with other intelligent species. The coalition established new principles of technological exchange and sovereignty. Planets devastated by human expansion received reparations and restoration assistance. And at the heart of this transformation stood the unlikely partnership that had exposed the darkness and pointed toward light. 5 years after their desperate flight through Europa Station, Varaxa stood beside Reeve on the observation deck of the CSS Renewal, the first joint species exploration vessel. Below them, the scarred surface of Neavine was showing signs of recovery. Bioengineering teams from 12 species worked together, applying techniques developed collaboratively to heal the wounded world. "It will never be exactly as it was," Varaxa said, watching new growth spread across her former homeland. "No," Reeve agreed, "but perhaps it can be something equally beautiful and more resilient." She touched the crystalline pendant at her neck, the genetic memories of her ancestors. Once she had carried it as a reminder of what she had lost and who should pay. Now it represented something different, a bridge between what had been and what could be. "My people have a saying," she told him. "The universe knows no straight paths, only spirals that return us to ourselves." She turned to face the human who had chosen justice over loyalty, truth over power. I came seeking revenge, but found something I never expected. What's that? Reeve asked. Varaxa gazed back at the regenerating planet. Hope, she said simply. Not just for my world, but for yours as well. Above them, the stars beckoned, not as conquests to be claimed by any single species, but as challenges to be faced. Together, the path forward would not be easy, but for the first time since watching her world burn, Varaxa believed in the possibility of a future worth building. And in that moment, both the alien girl and the human commander understood that the greatest revenge against those who dealt in hatred and fear was to create something they could never destroy. A universe where different worlds looked upon each other not with suspicion, but with wonder.